Hi everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Data 101, Data Connections, Binding to Data, and Master Detail. With us today, besides myself, Jason Barris, SVP of Developer Tools here at Infragistics, is George Abraham, our Senior Product Owner, Senior UX Architect, and all things App Builder, as well as everyone online with the teams, Ravko, Pablo, Hristo, Brian, and everyone else. Please ask questions of these guys because they have all the answers for anything that you want to know about App Builder or Ignite UI or what we're doing in this space. So today we are going to do an overview of data binding. I'm going to show you how to connect to data, how to do a hierarchical data binding. It's very easy. And then we're going to show how to do a master detail. All mostly just spending time in demo. Then we'll wrap it up, ask questions in the Q&A or chat, and of course the recording and the slide deck will be sent tomorrow by the marketing folks, Jesse and JJ, who are online as well. So let's go ahead and get started. As usual, I'd like to highlight the grid. Today we are going to be showing lots of grid features, of course, because that's how you display data in most of your data binding applications. Keep in mind, we are continuously improving the capabilities of the grid. I know there's a couple feature gaps on what we just shipped in Blazor. One of the things we're working on now is loading and saving layouts. So you'll see that soon in the Blazor grid. That's already in the Angular grid, so you don't have to worry about that feature there. But as we get all of our APIs and everything sorted out through the rest of this year, our goal is to have 100% parity on features and capabilities across Blazor, Angular, React, and web components. So when we are generating code in App Builder, you get the same experience no matter what. We have had some questions recently about hierarchical grid. Hierarchical grid, of course, is in the toolbox of Ignite UI, but it's not in the toolbox of App Builder yet. And we're going to continue to delay that until we get all of the features completed in the flat grid, because the flat grid is really the core grid that feeds into the tree grid and the hierarchical grid. And then once all these features are completed, like things like load and save layout are pretty critical. Once that's done across all of the grids, then it's really easy for us to just slot in that hierarchical grid into App Builder, into the toolbox, and then into like Blazor and web components, etc. So we're going to continue to push that off. It'll probably be coming later in Q4 or sometime in Q1. Not sure yet. Depends how much we get done. And then the other question we get asked a lot about is React. We are looking to ship the React grid very soon. Within the next 4 to 6 weeks, you'll see the React grid coming into Ignite UI. And then about a month or 6 weeks after that, definitely before the end of this year, we want to have the React code generation completed inside of App Builder. So this month, next month, very important to new features coming in the grids and in Ignite UI and App Builder. The last webinar, we covered a lot of features on chart. We're continuing to work on the chart toolbar feature, which we shipped in 23.1, and with 23.2 shipping in October, November of this year, you'll see more of those features. And then I hope to have that chart toolbar into App Builder this year as well, along with a few other chart enhancements in the App Builder, because there's some new feature requests that we see on GitHub. So with that, let's start today's demo about data and data binding in App Builder. Okay, so the first thing that I want to show today is what we're using for data binding. So I'm always using this Northwind Cloud application. It's hosted in Azure, but there's some things that I want to highlight, because when you're dealing with Entity Framework and these REST endpoints, which is how we connect data into App Builder, you want to be careful about the payload size and kind of what's going on with the data that's coming back. So for example, if I scroll down and I look at this customer's min endpoint that I created, and I'll click try it out, you can see that my schema is going to return 4 fields: customer ID, name, title. I'll execute this guy, and this comes back relatively quick. and there's not a whole lot going on here in terms of the data that comes back. It's very manageable. If I look at just the straight up customers table, I will go ahead and click try it out. Before I do that though, you'll see that there is more information coming back for customers. I'll click execute and you can see that I get all of this phone number and etc. So even if I'm doing a simple card view or a list view, and I just really want to display maybe the company name, the customer ID, I will use a different endpoint that is minimizing the amount of data that's coming back. And you'll see that a lot through some of these endpoints that I end up using. But what really will get you is if you take some of the default entity framework capabilities in your application and you are returning hierarchical data. So you can see here that this is going to return the customer information along with their order information, which means if this customer has 20 orders, I'm returning a ton of data just for this particular user. And by the way, this would be the default in Entity Framework. I've modified my endpoints so they're not, but this ends up being a ton of data that for the most part you don't want. So I've got all the customer data, all the order data, just not good. So what I did, even in this case, is I have another endpoint called customer orders min, and I'm still having the same hierarchical data coming back, but it's a minimal amount. It's basically just what I need. So what you need to do is craft your queries correctly to make sure that you are only bringing back the data that you want. So how do you know what to look out for? So if I go to Visual Studio, this is my Northwind Cloud app, and this has all of these endpoints that I use in the product. So you can see here I've got the customers class. And what is the customers class doing here? It's got this orders table, it's got customer types, and then it's returning all of these fields, or it's going to return the schema, and then of course populate these when I actually call a get. Now here are the other collections that it's going to return based on foreign key relationships. So in this case, it'll return orders and customer types, which are defined up here. How do I avoid that? Well, you avoid returning all that data by using the JSON ignore attribute. And what that'll do is it'll just return this and it'll ignore all of that. And you have to kind of play around with this because if you're doing CRUD, you could end up in some wonky situations where there's a foreign key dependency and your updates or your inserts fail. So just be careful as you do this, or you're just kind of obviously testing it as you're building out your APIs. But this is what you need to look out for. And you'll notice here, I've got my customer minimal, which I actually don't think I use that. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But in this case, I am just returning just straight up customer data. Now, if I go to customer orders, this is returning all of the orders with the customer data. So that's the one that's returning all of that data. And then here I've got customer order summary, and I just want the customer class and the order class. Here for order min, I'm just getting an order ID, customer order min summary, customer name, company name, and orders. So this is just returning two fields and then all of those orders in all of the fields in the orders table. So I have modified my classes to make sure that I'm only asking or only getting what I really need, because when you're building a line of business app, it could get pretty crazy pretty quick with the amount of data that you're asking for. And then the other thing that I'm doing is in my queries, I'm being very careful about the fields that I'm joining on and what I'm pulling back. So I use a lot of these link statements to bring back only the information that I need, or maybe additional information. So one of the things I did today for this demo, if I hit Control F and we'll go to employees, is I modified my standard employees API call, and I asked for an concatenated full name to come back which is something I want to display in a list in my demo. So I'm just tweaking these things as I'm going. Now, do I need all the employee data? Maybe not. But what this will allow me to do is just give me everything, and I could have just said, hey, just give me employee location or city, state, etc. But anyway, this is how I am trying to be more responsible with my payload size. You have your own techniques. Maybe you're doing other things. But in this application, I'm doing as much as I possibly can. Oh, and it looks like I am. Customers min actually is using that customer minimal class that we looked at. So if we go to its definition, it's just pulling back this stuff. And I prefer this anyway because it gets really confusing when you have a lot of stuff coming back in your web API calls because you don't need it. One of the ones I probably will use today is this invoices one. And invoices is just crazy. If I go to invoices here and let's see where this is at. Yeah, I think it's invoices by customer ID. Invoices, customer ID, invoices, orders, order ID. And if I go to order invoice summary, let's go to definition. This will get all of this invoices data. And look at all these fields. I don't need most of these. But anyway, that is what it is. I usually will only use what API is really targeted towards the example. And when I started this Northwind Cloud, I was just using straight up all of the entities I just kind of mapped the tables to entities. So some of this stuff really wasn't completely thought through, but whatever, it is what it is now. And we are going to use this in our application. So let's go ahead and copy this localhost 7149. The reason I'm not using my Azure instance today is because I made some changes and I just didn't deploy it yet. But we're also going to go over to App Builder. This is the App Builder preview. The App Builder preview is, as I sort of mentioned in previous webinars, this is stuff that's going to ship in the next few weeks. And it does have this state and context binding / master detail feature that everyone is so excited about, and I'm going to highlight that today. So the first thing I'll do is do a new application. I'm going to use the nav plus content template, and this will give me a couple links at the top that I can add some views to, and I think actually we already have 3 views added. The first thing I'm going to do, however, is I'm going to enable this application to use this data from my Swagger endpoint. So what I'm going to do is click the plus sign, go to REST API, and I'm going to call this Northwind Webinar Demo, and go to Swagger, Open API. Let's go ahead and paste this in and hit save, and then we can go to configure endpoints. So all of these endpoints are now available to me. So let's go ahead and add a few of these guys. So we'll probably definitely do something with customers min. We'll do something with customer orders just to kind of highlight how that works. What I'm doing here is I'm selecting what I want available in my application. I could very easily select all of these, but I don't need all of them. When you do select items, you can go to the right-hand side here and click the send button to make sure that this endpoint works. And then you'll see what the response content is and what the headers are coming back into App Builder. So in this case, I can see my customers min looks good. Data's coming back. Employee orders by employee ID. Something went wrong. Well, why? Because it's looking for a parameter that goes along with this API. So now if I put in my parameter and I look at the details, you can see here I have the orders by employee, and this looks like to be a lot of fields coming back. But if I have my employees, I can select one and then show this data. Let's go ahead and do customers. Let's scroll down a bit here. Let's do customer orders min. Customer orders min is another one that is great hierarchical data. So in a tree view, for example, I could show customer ID or company name and then show the orders. And then when you select an order, maybe show invoices or order details or something like that. So let's scroll down. And let's look at invoices by order ID. And in this case, something went wrong again. 10692, I do know, is a valid order. So that's what will come back from that particular API call. Order details we don't need. And let's see if there's any other ones that we want to use. Customer order history is always a good one. I'll type in ALFKey as my default. We'll hit send, and we'll look at these details. And these are the total number of orders by product by customer. And let's do customer order details by order ID, and etc. So I am just making sure things work and things look good, because I want to use all this stuff in my demo. So let's do ALFKey here, and we'll hit send, and we are ready to go. So I'm going to just select all these guys, and now what happens is I can, within these fields, look at what these schemas look like. So customer orders min, customer orders, you can see here, this is my hierarchical data. You can see I've got the customer data, then the orders. So how do we bind to that hierarchical data? You're going to see that today, and so on. So let's go ahead and hit the done button. We're happy with all this stuff. And on this button on the top, we're just going to do customer orders like so. This guy will do employee history, or actually we'll just call it orders. That's cool. And view 3, I don't know what we'll do there yet. But let's go over to view 1. And view 1, I'm going to delete this. I'm going to delete this. And I'm going to do something extremely simple here. I'm going to pick a side-by-side layout and just hit done. And the purpose of this particular example, I want to just highlight how to do hierarchical data. We added the ability to bind to hierarchical data earlier this year, and it's pretty straightforward. So on this side, I'm going to add a tree view. So let's do Control E, and I'm going to type in tree, and we'll do our tree. And on this side, I'm going to bind to a grid. So I'll do Control E, and I'll select grid. Now what I also want to do here is I want to add a little bit more margin to make this look a little nicer. So in my tree, in my tree control here, let's select the tree. That was easier. Let's do another 20 pixel margin. What I just did is I went down here to the outline, or the DOM, the document object model. It's easy to select items here like so, and then you can set properties on the right-hand side. Now for the tree, it's already coming with some fake data. What I want to do is delete a lot of this stuff here. So I'm going to delete, I'm just hitting the delete key. And the way the tree works is you can add nodes like so, and then you could set the level of the nodes. But we're just going to use 2 levels of node here, and I want to bind this now to data. So at the top level, I'm going to say, go ahead and let's do some data binding. I want to go to my Northwind webinar demo data set. So you're always going to see data on the right-hand side. And in this case, I want to do my customers orders min. So I'm going to select customer orders min. And now that I've selected that endpoint, I can set the binding properties by just clicking the little connection button here. So at this level, I want to show the company name. So now you can see I have the company name showing up. So if I hit the run button, all of a sudden I've got all this data here, and the company name is bound to the top, and then nothing was really bound over here, like so. Now, how do we get this to show the second level of hierarchy? Well, let's go back to data. I want to go, and what happens is in something like a tree or other components that support hierarchy, you're going to get this data context option. So it's saying, hey, there's already data bound to this control. Do you want to use fields from that data source? So I'm going to say, yes, I do. And what I want to do is bind to the order ID, which is the hierarchical view that I'm looking for. Now, if I go back to this, and you'll see here, it has API customers min.orders. So it knew to offer me items from the next level in the hierarchy, or one of the levels in the hierarchy, because there could be multiple. So in this case, I'm good to go here. I'm not going to do any of the other fields here. Now, the other thing that you probably noticed is when I ran this, it was a little crazy because I have this list on the side completely out of control. No one's going to scroll forever. to just get to an order. So I'm going to change a couple things here. The first thing I'm going to uncheck is show as expanded. So now my tree node or my tree nodes will not be expanded automatically. And then in the column layout container, I'm going to go to the overflow and I'm going to say auto. And what that's going to do is show me a scroll bar. So it will just scroll automatically within the container of wherever it lives. In this case, the column layout. So let's just kind of make it look like so. And we will run this. And there we go. You can see here I have my customers, and when I drill in, I have my orders, and it really does look good. One thing we will change here is I mucked around with the width of my tree, so let's go ahead and fix this area here. So it is set to a width. I want to change this to unset. So now if I do that and I run it, it still looks a little funky, but I'll go to edit again, and I'm going to tell it to grow. Take up the area that you live in here, and please look nice. And now it looks nice. So there we go. That looks pretty good. So now what do we want to do? What I want to do is when I select one of these guys, I want to update this grid with the orders for, or the invoices for these particular orders, kind of like the line items. So let's go back to edit. Let's go to our grid, and on the grid, we are going to change its data source to Northwind Webinar Demo to API invoices orders, and we're going to pass in the order ID parameter. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. You'll see here that something shows up, mostly because if you remember when I added this to test it out, 10692, that order actually is what's showing. But you'll also notice here I have this button that showed up next to the get because it's looking for a parameter. So it's looking for the order ID. But what I need to do is set the order ID. So if I go back to my tree and I'm going to expand these nodes and I'm going to select this guy here, I want to add an interaction, and that interaction is going to be set variable. So in set variable, I want to select a target value and I want to set the source value for that. So the source value is going to be the order ID I select. So let's click this guy. We'll create a new variable. I am going to call this my order ID. This will be a number, and I will click create. Now I want to select a source value for that. So the source value will be what gets selected from my tree, the order ID, and now that populates nicely. And then the last thing we need to do is tell the grid what parameter should be passed to the web API to populate its data. So we have API invoices order ID. So we're going to click this new button here, and we want to bind to my order ID, which is getting set here. And if we send this, view details, nothing's happening yet because I haven't sent anything, but let's go ahead and run this guy. And when I select the order ID underneath the customer, you can see that the grid changes on the left. Now, the fields are a little wacky here because these are all like the same fields in the grid that you would see for every order ID. So let's go down to the invoices and we'll look at like the invoice order ID all the way down to here. And I'm going to drag these up like so. And now this, we should see some change in what is getting selected. So as I select these, you can see that data is changing, especially here, the product that we're selecting. So there you go. We've set up a master detail with hierarchical data, and it is slick. And we will now go to our view 2, and I want to highlight a couple components here that do a little bit different with the data binding. I want to add a list control here, and maybe we'll add a card view as well. Let me do a Control E and do a card. And here, what I want to do is do some data binding for this component. So this works just like any other component. I select it, and on the left-hand side, I can go to data. I am going to go to the Northwind data, which is built in to App Builder, and go to employees. Now on the employees, I want to change the data bound from the title to be last name, the subtitle. I want to say first name. But now you'll notice I have some other options here, like do I want to show the avatar or not? Do I want to show the actions or not? If I select the actions, I can change things like what should the action be? Maybe change it to an icon. Maybe it's going to be a data bound action. But in this case, maybe I'll change it to a phone, and I want it to be a large phone. Now I also want to change the avatar. So if I select just the item, you'll notice the avatar isn't here. I actually need to select the avatar and then change its type to image and then bind it to a field in my data set. And in this case, there is an avatar URL, and there's my avatar URL. We'll make it large. Yep, I can make it sort of rounded, and that actually looks pretty cool. Now, if I run this, you'll see the same thing we had before where it's just scrolling forever, because on the container, which is the column layout, I want to set the overflow to auto, and that will give me scroll bars for this particular item. So let's hit run again, and now you can see I have scroll bars, and you can do select events and all that. So here it's the same story. If I select this and I go to interactions, and maybe I wanted to do some like I said earlier, maybe some orders by employee ID, etc., I could set a variable or do a master detail with this. Now the card view is similar. If I go to its data mode, you can see it showed up a little data bound here. I have different views for the card view. So let's go ahead and use the same employee's data, and I will leave it at 5 as the default. If I change the type, there's the social column, the media column, the actions column, like so. So this is like a nice actions column for this guy. I can change the avatar, swap the avatar out for a media, for a different image. So I have different data binding options. And again, I can do the same thing with my data binding. Let's do last name. We can do first name, like so. So it's going to look similar. I can select this guy, change it to an image, and change this to the same field we had before, the avatar URL. But the idea is you have a lot of flexibility with how these components work and how they're displayed based on your goals of your application. And if I change this back to a media column, I can change this to a URL. I can bind it again back to my field. And I use this a lot. If you ever see me do demos for Reveal, I use the card view to really demonstrate, like showing dashboard previews, etc. But again, these are very rich components. There's a lot of data binding capabilities. You just have to make sure you know that you're selecting individual items based on the type of component to set the bindings. So make sure that you're just aware of that as you explore these components in your data binding. And then finally, I will do one last example. We'll just leave it full screen. I'll do a Control E. We'll do a grid. And for the grid, let's do another margin here of 30 pixels. So we have a nice background. I want to bind this to my Northwind data, and we'll just do orders maybe. Let's do Northwind orders. And for the grid, it's a unique component because it has features. So just remember that you can just go and set all of these features on the grid to enable all of the additional capabilities that you may want to have when you deliver this to your customers. So here, for example, I selected pager. Let's go down to the pager. I'm going to click the 10. I'm going to set this to like 50, like so. And we'll run this screen, and there is my grid with all of my data. I can do cool things like interactive Outlook group by. Maybe we'll do something a little bit different with that. Can we find a different field? Maybe we'll do ship address, like so. Now I have some groups here. I have my exporting options, my advanced filter options. I can pin columns to the left, so maybe I always want customer ID pinned to the left. Now when I scroll back and forth, there's customer ID. I can resize columns. I can move columns, all kinds of neat capability here. And of course, I have the default Excel style filter with this as well. So very powerful. And here, just for the heck of it, let's go ahead and export that to Excel. And if we pop open Excel, the nice thing about this grid is it will give you the same hierarchy and layout that you had inside of your settings in the grid. So just like that, you've got something pretty cool, pretty advanced, and pretty robust. So with that, we're done with the demo. Let's switch back over to the slides and wrap up. Okay, so hopefully you got a good feel of how easy it is to get data binding going in your applications with App Builder. And as we continue to add features, it just gets better and better, continuing to save you more time. Eventually, by the time you generate code, there's going to be very little code that you have to write. So very exciting in terms of the low-code story with App Builder. And then maybe in the next year or so, we're getting to a no-code story. So a lot of neat things happening there. I think the master detail, the state and context binding is the biggest feature that we've shipped or we will be shipping this year. So we're very excited about this and I can't wait to get it into your hands. You can start using it right now in the preview build, the preview app builder URL that I highlighted. It will be in production in the next 2 to 3 weeks and you'll be able to use it there with code generation and all that good stuff. In the meantime, please answer the poll that popped up. That poll informs all of the features that we ship in App Builder, and it lets us know what you're thinking about how development's going today, the capabilities that you need in your applications, etc. So go ahead and get Blazor, get App Builder, get Ignite UI. It doesn't really matter. The way App Builder works today is when you purchase App Builder, you're getting those frameworks that we deliver in code generation. So if you're not an App Builder customer and you're not a UI components customer, go ahead and purchase a license for App Builder and you'll get everything that you saw today, plus all of the code generation that goes along with it. We didn't go into CRUD today with the data binding. We've done a bunch of different webinars on CRUD. Those really need their own, 30-minute demo. So if you are looking at how to do CRUD or wondering how to do CRUD, go ahead to our YouTube site and take a look at some of the webinars we've done previously on CRUD and how to enable CRUD in your applications. Of course, go to Discord to get the best support and talk to the product team if you have issues, questions, etc. And that's really where you find out really everything that's latest in the product. So the day that we release this state and context binding and the master detail features, if you're on Discord, you're going to know first because that's going to show up in the announcements right there on Discord. So everything is available there for you, which is awesome. So I want to thank you and I appreciate all of your time. We will stay online and wrap up all of the remaining questions. I want to thank George for attending today as well. And we will see you at the next webinar. Thanks again, everyone.